Hi, I'm John the Engineer Turmel, and tonight I'm going to participate in the Saddleback debate between Barack Obama and John McCain, their first debate. There's a chance there's going to be a North American Union, and if ever there were, I'd be running for president or prime minister of that union. So I may as well take this opportunity to explain what I could do for not only Canada, but the United States and the world as well. So I'm going to be throwing in my answers and one liners to these arguments made by the other candidates, and I hope you appreciate the errors they're making and the ways they could be fixed.
Now, for me as a Christian, it's also a sacred union. God's in the mix. But
Would you support a constitutional amendment with that definition?
no, I would not.
Why not?
And because historically we have not defined marriage in our Constitution. It's been a matter of state law. That has been our tradition. Now, I mean, let's break it down. The reason that people think there needs to be a constitutional amendment, some people believe, is because of the concern that about same-sex marriage.
I never understood the concern about same sex marriage. The God I worship doesn't care who tickles whose tutu when.
Got a bill right here in California, Proposition 8, yes, that's going on because the court overturned, yes, this definition of marriage. Yes. Was the Supreme Court of California wrong?
I believe they were wrong, and I strongly support preserving the unique status of marriage between man and woman.
Okay.
And
I wonder why preserving the status of marriage for only a man and a woman is important at all. As long as there's no financial advantage to it, then there should be no trouble, right? I think the problem is there is financial advantage to being married, and therefore I can understand why a gay couple would want to have those same advantages and fight for them too. So first, let's get rid of all unfair advantages to go to marriage and see if gays really want to get into contracts that are going to take lawyers to break. Imagine, as soon as it's legal, they're going to have as much trouble breaking up as we straights do.
I am not somebody who promotes same-sex marriage, but I do believe in civil unions. I do believe that we should not, that for gay partners to want to visit each other in a hospital, for the state to say, you know what, that's all right. I don't think in any way inhibits my core beliefs about what marriage are. I think my faith is strong enough and my marriage is strong enough that I can afford those civil rights to others, even if I have a different perspective or a different view.
I'm a federalist. I believe in that states should make those decisions. In my state, I hope we will make that decision. In other states, they have, to recognize the unique status of marriage between man and woman. And that doesn't mean that people can't enter into legal agreements. That doesn't mean that, that they don't have the rights of all citizens. I'm not saying that.
Well, yes, you are. You're fighting to treat them differently.
I am saying that we should preserve the unique status of marriage between one man and one woman.
Why?
And if a federal court decided that my state of Arizona had to observe what the state of Massachusetts decided, then I would favor a constitutional amendment. Until then, I believe the states should make the decisions within their own states.
Sounds like he's ready to put up a pretty big fight over something completely unnecessary.
Define rich. Okay, I mean, give me a number. Is it 50,000, 100,000, 200,000? Everybody keeps talking about, yeah, well, who we're going to tax. Right. How do you define that?
You know, if you've got book sales of 25 million, then you qualify. And I just want to.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. No,
I'm not asking about me.
Look, here's how I think about it. Here's how I think about it. And this was reflected in my tax plan. If you are making $150,000 a year or less as a family, then you're middle class.
Middle class.
Or you may be poor, right? I mean, but 150 down, you're basically middle class. Obviously, it depends on region where you're living.
In this region, you're poor.
Yeah, well, depends. I don't know what housing prices have been doing lately. I would argue that if you're making more than $250,000, then you're in the top 3-4% of this country. You're doing well. Now, these things are all relative, and I'm not suggesting that everybody who's making over $250,000 is living on easy street. But the question that I think we have to ask ourselves is, if we believe in good schools, if we believe in good roads, if we want to make sure that kids can go to college, if we don't want to leave a mountain of debt for the next generation, then we've got to pay for these things.
Sure, I'll pay my tax for army and police to handle strife. I'll pay my tax for doctors, nurses who protect my life. I'll pay my tax for all engaged repairing road and sewer. I'll pay my tax for social servants helping out the poor. I'll even pay my tax for bureaucrats. With no regret, I only object to paying tax for interest on debt.
They don't come for free. And it is irresponsible. I believe it is irresponsible intergenerationally for us to invest or for us to spend $10 billion a month on a war and not have a way of paying for it. That I think is unacceptable. So nobody likes to pay taxes. I haven't sold 25 million books, but I've been selling some books lately. And so I write a pretty big check to Uncle Sam. Nobody likes it. What I can say is that under the approach I'm taking, if you make $150,000 or less, you will see a tax cut. If you're making $250,000 a year or more, you're going to see a modest increase. What I'm trying to do is create a sense of balance and fairness in our tax code.
So basically, nothing much is going to change. I call it splashing in the pool. Remember, the problem is in the money pump house. Everybody goes and borrows 10 gallons of liquidity from the bank, and they all promise to bring back 11 gallons of liquidity to the pump house bank. They all dump their 10 in the pool. They all try and come out at the pool with 11. And of course, at the end of the game, only 9 guys come up with 11 gallons. The 10th guy gets squeezed out of his death gamble, elimination musical chairs type game, and the banker seizes his collateral, resulting in the same liquidity, 100 gallons, chasing only 9 watches. And the liquidity has
One thing I think we can all agree on is that it should be simpler so that you don't have all these loopholes and big stacks of stuff that you've got to comb through, which wastes a huge amount of money and allows special interests to take advantage of things that ordinary people cannot take advantage of.
Right. Okay.
Sure, taxation should be made simpler. And the easiest way of all is to have an asset tax once a year where everybody chips in a percentage of what they're worth. And that way the richest man chips in the most and the poorest man chips in the least. Instead of having to income tax, sales tax, with having to have receipts for every single transaction and armies of accountants to control and manage all these receipts for every hamburger and hot dog we ever eat. Well, there's nothing as stupid as having a sales tax and an income tax when you could have an asset tax.
Some of the richest people I've ever known in my life are the most unhappy. I think that rich should be defined by a home, a good job, an education, and the ability to hand to our children a more prosperous and safer world than the one that we inherited.
Here's how Jesus defines rich in the Bible. He who has abundance. And the rule of interest is, to he who has abundance will more be given. And from him who has no abundance, even what he has will be taken away. That's how interest works. And a society without interest, here's how he explained it in Paul, Corinthians 2, chapter 8, 14. Your abundance should at the present time be a supply for their want, so their abundance can later be supply for your want. And in that way, he who gathers much doesn't have too much. He who gathers little doesn't have too little. So if after all of your debts are paid, after all your payments are figured out, if you are in the net positive and making interest, you're rich. If you are in the net negative, paying interest, you're poor.